We have our special guest. Okay, joining us now is the author of the Transhumanist Wager, Zoltan Istvan. And first of all, I want to point out, Zoltan is nice enough to join us to discuss his book. And I wanted to make sure to make clear that he is a guest of ours and is no way affiliated with our show. Like everybody else who comes on wants us to say before they start talking.
I don't know why.
I don't either. I haven't figured that out yet. So how is it going, Zoltan?
Great, and thanks so much for the disclaimer, and also thanks so much for having me on your show. I appreciate that.
No problem. First of all, I think we talked a little bit beforehand, and we wanted to kind of go over a little bit of your past, just so people know kind of where you're coming from. I was thinking maybe you could kind of go down a little bit of some of the things you've done in the past as far as work-related stuff and your journalism career beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my life really began when I bought a very small sailboat, a 25-footer, right around the age of 21, and started sailing around the world. The sailboat was an excellent opportunity to carry a ton of books with me, and I sort of just wanted to go traveling and read a lot of books and right after college, and it was just kind of a great experience. But it helped form me in a lot of different ways. I saw a million things, been to around 100 countries plus at this point, and also it got me involved in journalism, which is eventually about 5-6 years later how I got involved with the National Geographic Channel, and then for around 4 years just worked for them most of the time, both on the sailboat and off the sailboat, and doing all sorts of really fun and exciting stories. And I think working for National Geographic just gave me a whole new perspective, because some of the things that I was covering, whether it was conflict zones, I did a lot of conflicts to begin with, or just some of the indigenous tribes that I visited, or just some of the cultural things that I saw, it was a real mind-expanding experience for everything.
Also, now I don't know if this was before or after, I read that you were the communications director for Wild 8 as well. Was that a before National Geographic, or did you use your experiences from that to get that position and work within it?
Yeah, so and Wild 8 is an absolutely wonderful organization. Basically, they're one of the most aggressive organizations that is attempting to stop the illegal wildlife trade. And most people don't know this, but it's a $20 billion industry, and right after human trafficking and drugs and stuff like that. So it's a massive industry, and they're out there trying to stop it. And actually, I was covering them for a story for National Geographic, and that's how I made the connection with them. And a year later, they said, hey, if you have the time, come on board with us. And so I was in Southeast Asia as the communications director of Cambodia, which is their largest country at the time. And I was just going on a lot of patrols with our rangers, and they're always armed. And essentially, you're somewhat hunting the poachers. You're actually trying to stop them, and if you have to, using arms to stop them from doing what they do, which is essentially kill tigers and collect wildlife, especially a lot of endangered stuff, and then sell it overseas and mostly to China.
I mean, it's pretty disgusting to me as far as the way the human race treats nature. And I know that you are a big proponent for Mother Nature and taking care of the environment. But I kind of wanted to go back to some of your conflict zone interests. Did you ever fear for your life? Because I've always kind of wondered about that, like people that are embedded in that and kind of see it day in and day out. Like, do you feel like an outsider looking in, or do you really feel like you're a part of the whole conflict and you're just collateral just like everybody else is?
Well, I think you're collateral. And I think honestly, the whatever army or military is in charge essentially sees you as collateral. The only difference is that you have a little bit, perhaps a lot more, but they don't want to do anything wrong with you, because you're the person that brings the news out, and can get them in trouble. That said, I don't think that they fundamentally see journalists as much more different than anyone else, that they're just trying to either get rid of or silence or whatever to get their objectives done. And so I have personally, I think, had two very, very close experiences, either with some blast, or just also, there was and some things don't always turn out as hardcore as you think. When I was in Pakistan, I got off the bus and I was immediately approached by a bunch of people with guns. And it turned out that they were the Secret Service, and I was just being escorted the entire time that I was going to be in there covering the conflict. However, they don't have such things, or at least they didn't in Kashmir and Muzaffarabad, where I was at, badges and stuff like that, and the language barrier was impossible. So, for a good 2-3 hours, I had no idea if it was a kidnapping or if it was just something else. They ended up being very nice people and probably kept me very safe over the next week that I was there. But those are the kind of things that I've had happen, and they can be incredibly scary. But I have not actually had any bullet wounds or anything of that nature, thankfully.
You brought up the Pakistani thing. Now, I read that you had been a part of a documentary called Pawns of Paradise. Is that during the filming of that incident took place?
Yes. In fact, I have most of that on film. Of course, I didn't film as soon as they were coming to get me right off the bus. Essentially, you go from Pakistan into Kashmir, and even though it's part of Pakistan, or at least they claim, it's still all a contested area. And so as soon as you cross these borders, it really does become kind of no man's land, and it becomes a full scale. I mean, these are India and Pakistan have been at war with each other over this area for 60 odd years. Yeah. And so there's so much military involved. You really, there's very little, there's civilians, but you just really can't tell anymore. At least in Islamabad, you know what the police force looks like. They're dressed like police. As soon as you get to these other areas, even a lot of the military people are no longer dressed like military people. Everyone's just carrying around their AK-47s. So it's a pretty hardcore kind of area to enter, and then as soon as you get off the bus into some of the main drop-off points, it's really quite scary. You have no idea what's going on, and no one speaks any English, and things like even cell phones and stuff like that. At least the time I was there were very hard to come by.
Not to get off, but just to kind of maybe give a little promotion on that as well. I have seen stories on that before, and I'm pretty interested in that area. I have to admit, I tried to look up the documentary itself, and I really couldn't find it. Is there somewhere in particular that I'd be able to find that documentary?
Unfortunately, so, pawnsofparadise.com is the website, and you can go and look. There's some promotional videos, but the documentary is actually with a distribution company right now, okay. And I've been kind of on strict terms that I'm not allowed to show it, even though I did run the documentary through film festivals for the first year, and that's actually how I secured a distributor in the first place. But the best you can do is just go onto YouTube and type in, either Zoltan Istvan /Kashmir or Zoltan Istvan Kashmir National Geographic, and that video and a couple of videos of that, some of the stuff in there should come up, including a highlight video. But unfortunately, I somewhat signed off the rights, and the people representing it are have told me to, not be able to show it.
I know how it works. Like I said, we've talked to people in the music industry, so we have aware of that. Yeah, like I said, I saw a little clip of it, and it looked pretty interesting to me. And I saw like you said, all the different awards that you guys had won in some of the smaller film things. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. In it. So sorry that you're not going to get the funds for that you probably so richly deserve, but. Hey, what are you going to do? So, of course, the main reason we have you on here is to talk about your new novel, The Transhumanist Wager. Now, I do want to bring up that this book on Amazon, you hit #1 in the science fiction and the philosophy category, which I think is apropos because I saw that you have degrees from Columbia University. Get ready for that. I mispronounced a lot of stuff. In religious studies and philosophy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And, it was #1 in science fiction visionary,
okay.
As well, and #1 in philosophy on Amazon. And yes, I do have a degree in philosophy and religion from Columbia. And I was really excited, especially about the philosophy category, because for those that study it, that represents a kind of a special point. And I've been just really happy to have the book do as well as it's kind of done. It's only been about 4 months since I've released it, and I'm an indie author, so that I don't have there's no promotional team. It's just me and me and my computer, and I've just been trying to do my best to get it out there. and it seems to have hit the right people and got some good reviews. So it has been slowly catching on. In fact, quite quickly at the moment right now.
I'm a little curious. Because of your background in journalism and having some of the connections I would think you have, how come do you think it was so difficult for you to find a publisher for it, or did you want to go independent?
No. In fact, I tried. I got 668 refusal letters. In fact, I tried every publisher and literary agent that I could find in the various books in the country, and a lot of people requested to look at it. The problem is that it really is highly anti-religious, and it's become this incredibly controversial.
Oh yeah, it's always an issue.
Yeah, story. Even a couple places ran some articles or reviews on it recently, and I think there's 91 comments on the IEET article that came out about 4 or 5 days ago. It was a negative review, but not necessarily a negative review on the book or the writing, just a negative review on the actual. The morality of the ideas themselves, and like I said, it's highly anti-religious. It goes way beyond your normal atheistic perspective, and I think that really turns off a lot of both publishers and agents at the time, because it just seems like, well, how can you sell a book that's so angry or so at least going to turn off people so much? The truth, though, is that there's a huge body of people out there that have very, secular values, that have atheistic perspectives, and are willing to even cross further lines in that and think, how far should we take, our atheism, especially in the face of, a planet that's about 95% religious and is stopping some of the science and technology that would enable humanity to live better. And this is kind of why we get into transhumanism, which is essentially some of those ideas, using transhumanism to essentially live better, live longer, and hopefully help all of society to be just a better place. But nobody really saw that perspective. What they saw was the anti-religious attitude, and I think that's why most publishers and agents turned it down. However, now that the book's been so successful, I've already had a number of people approach me. But I put in all my work now.
Yeah.
I've spent a year doing the promotional stuff and all the editing myself. So it kind of defeats the purpose at this point to necessarily try to sell it off when I have already gone through the entire system.
Oh yeah, that's kind of how it works with any medium. It's if you go out independent and you're successful, then all of a sudden all the money grabbers want to jump in and say, "Hey, we're on board." And it's like, well, you told me to fuck off last time, so why do you care now?
No, absolutely. And I got to be honest, they did tell me to fuck off. That was exactly the kind of stuff that I heard from a huge amount of people. People would actually sometimes not even email me back, and just the amount of. I don't know exactly, but just viciousness that I've received once people actually got into the book and said, "Oh, wow, you're that type of person." And of course, I keep telling everyone it's a novel that's designed to.
Not everybody thinks that Stephen King is a serial killer. Like
exactly. And it's just a book, and it's designed to provoke ideas. And I wasn't. What's wrong with provoking ideas? So.
Well, I think it's because you hit close to home. I think that's why. Like. My analogy, Stephen King, like he goes to a whole nother perspective, but you really hit people where it hurts. So I think they get very defensive, and they view it as that's how you feel. You actually think that the actions that your main character does in the book should do. And I know that you've probably gotten a lot of flack for the polarization in the book and how black and white it is. But I'm pretty sure that you had an aim and a goal and a reason to do that. Do you think you can go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And just so your listeners know, transhumanism, just the actual Latin, just means beyond human. And so it's really, there's a lot of weird definitions about transhumanism, but basically it just means using science and technology to enable your life and make it better, and hopefully especially make yourself live longer. And getting in a car is a very transhumanist idea. Picking up any tool. I mean, at that point when we actually started improving ourselves by using other material objects, and now we use smartphones and whatnot. These are all kind of transhumanistic ideas. So it's not something that's so far-fetched. People hear it and they think, it's crazy science fiction. But ultimately, I support a huge amount of the ideas in the book, and I thought incredibly deeply through them. And I know that some of them would never necessarily come true, or you would ever be put in that kind of dilemma where you would have some of those moral choices. But I believe it's very interesting to write about it, and I also believe it's very interesting to talk about it and discuss and try to say, hey, is this something that works? I mean, politicians have been doing this for years with game theory and the Cold Wars and stuff like that. And the book is very similar to that. It's designed to ask these questions and put you in a corner and say, well, what would you do in this set of circumstances? And essentially the story is about one man who wants to live forever, and he'll do anything to achieve it. And he's not going to live forever by, praying to some sun god or some person on a cross or something like that. He's going to do it with his hands and what he can use. And he's got tools, he's got computers, he's got all sorts of resources at his fingertips. He's going to use science and technology to try to make it so that he doesn't have to die. And that's essentially the foundation of the book. I think the controversy has come from the morals that he uses, the idea that he would do it at the expense of anything. And that's a very, very, selfish subject to say it that way. But it's not so different than I think a lot of people would feel if, they were at the train tracks and they had to save someone who was going to be hit, or some of these cartoons we watched as a young children. There are some incredibly difficult moral choices that we must all make, and it rarely actually comes to our lives when we actually have to make them, but it's certainly worth thinking about it. And that's what the book does. It puts a single character in a position where he has to make some incredibly tough moral choices, and he constantly makes them in favor of him living forever.
How very philosophical of you.
Yeah, no,
I can't. I don't think you used your degree to write the book at all, did you?
No, not well. So it's funny because I was on the philosophy chat boards on Reddit the other day, and they actually are looking for more technical ideas. But a lot of the ideas in the book, while using a philosophical background, they're actually layman's ideas. They're popular social philosophies, and it's nothing too grand. It's just a lot of times we never think about some of these things, and we don't think about, well, what if you had a choice and you were going to walk out of your studio and someone's going to shoot you? What would you do in your last 5 minutes? These are thoughts that we don't actually think of, but yet it presents a really interesting set of ideas. And if you actually thought about it and took it further and said, well, how would I live the last 5 minutes of my life? Those 5 minutes might be the most special. And so the book is trying to bring us to a new elevated type of psychology, at least an elevated type of perspective about how we can live our lives and how we should be dedicated to doing our best to preserve it, especially in the 21st century when, at least in my opinion, death has become, I don't want to say obsolete yet, but I want to say that it's something that can, with enough money, and we have enough money on planet Earth, to solve it in 10 to 15 years if we really put our resources to it. And unfortunately, with 95% of the world being religious, no one really cares to do that because they think there's some afterlife. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to get into with transhumanism is your ideas behind, because humanity is so stuck. They're stuck in a rut. They're stuck in the past with these religious ideas. We're extremely ignorant and violent, and any kind of new technology that comes around, if they can somehow make that into a weapon or make it a military application, that's more or less where the funding is going to go. It's not going to go towards the betterment of mankind. It's going to go towards, well, what can kill people the best, or what can the military-industrial complex use this as a function to make it more streamlined. And that's kind of what made me a little apprehensive when I started looking into transhumanism, was that if we really divulge a lot of attention to new technologies and branching out and trying to enhance human life, how would that technology be used? Because after all, I mean, when we learned how to split the atom, we decided to put all of our funding into how to make an A-bomb to blow the crap out of cities.
No, and I mean, in fact, that's an excellent question, because it brings up some of the classic worries about transhumanism, which is essentially, will everyone participate in the new technologies, or will just some tiny elite benefit? And also the idea of, will social orders remain the same, or will something completely digress and just a few people actually get to move ahead and everyone else just sort of disappear or succumb to chaos? I'm a believer that as long as a lot of the economic systems stay in place, or more or less, technology will sort of be like the iPhone, which is, when the cell phone first came out, it seemed like only the rich would have it. But it only took a few years before a lot of the middle classes got it. And now it turns out that virtually, most people in the world, even in third world and in Africa and some of the poorest countries, have cell phones. Some of them having 2 or 3. So it's the idea that I believe that in the coming future, if we're very careful and we're guarded, and we use history as a little bit of an example to not screw things up too much, we will be able to give everyone the technology to both improve their lives without leaving, at least, not leaving the majority of people behind. I don't know if everyone's going to accept it. I bet a huge amount of people are just going to say, no thanks. We don't want to augment our brains. We don't want to cut off our arms and put on robotic arms. We don't want to disappear into machines and be uploaded. So I'm assuming a lot of people will say no. But I don't think those that say yes will necessarily be left behind if we are very careful about it. But your concern is certainly my own concern, because I do not belong to that super rich elite, and I also don't want to get left behind.
Not to get too off topic, and you kind of brought up economic strain, but this is just a fight that me and Boggs have been having for many of shows. But what is your idea behind economics and the monetary paradigm? Do you think that money is a good thing? Do you think it still serves a purpose? Or do you think it's kind of a useless tool that humans still use that's kind of archaic and could be dropped? And if we just kind of lived a more free society to where we were just able to learn and better ourselves, that we would be better off as a species as a whole?
So I subscribe to the idea that a system that uses money is going to be beneficial up until the point when we can clearly see that it's no longer useful, or it's causing so much disruption in people's lives that we shouldn't use it. At this point in time, it seems almost impossible to go anywhere and to move about the normal world without it. That said, I think a lot of my sequel of the Transhumanist Wager will be based on AI. And I am realizing, as I look a little bit more and more into the philosophy, that it's hard to imagine that a bunch of machines might necessarily use money. They might have a much more, communistic, socialistic perspective. Now, I'm not saying I'm supporting any of that. I'm just saying it's possible that there might be a wholeness or a unity that's a lot easier to operate on as technology progresses further. Perhaps credits or something like that will be used. That's kind of more a replacement of money, but perhaps it'll just be more sharing because you have this oneness. Again, this kind of they say AI might be here, the equivalent of a human brain in 15 years. Maybe it'll be 25, 30, who knows? But it's one thing's for sure, that once it comes here, once it becomes smarter than the human being, it could very quickly change things. It could rewrite virtually every book. It could be have the best podcast in the world. Those kind of things. It could just be fascinating.
Not if we're around. No, I'm kidding.
That's right. But maybe it will also say, my AI brethren, we don't need use money. We just use our kind of together to accomplish our goals. Maybe it'll be some type of value system that is not based on money, but more based on accumulating power together, something like that. Very interesting concepts, but I don't really have an answer. What it would exactly be, but I do believe that as long as we're humans and as long as we're trying to move forward, it would be probably impossible to extricate ourselves kind of from the economic system that we are in right now. And I'm not saying we can't change it from capitalistic to something else. I'm just saying the idea of gold or money being replaced is very hard to imagine.
Now, this is kind of a weird, out of the park question. But with transhumanism in regards to Mother Nature, how do you feel that it really fits and equates to that? Do you think it gets to the point to where we're able to augment ourselves to the point to where we don't need the resources that we consume, so it doesn't matter what we do to the planet? Or do you think there somehow needs to be a symbiotic relationship between the two, and we still need to be, obviously right now we need to be conservationists, but in the future, if all this stuff transpires, that it eventually just becomes a useless facsimile that's only taking up space?
Well, I think ultimately as we evolve, we'll probably need less and less resources. The idea of uploading ourselves into a machine, the thing it's so great about is that, by that time, I don't know how long it'll be. Some people say 30, 40 years, could be less, could be more. But clearly the size of a computer chip at that point will probably, with nanotechnology and some of that stuff, be so tiny that it'll probably easily fit on your fingernail or something like that. And you'd probably be able to fit the entire population of the planet in one single building full of servers or something like that. That said, so what I'm trying to say is, with a couple solar panels on top, maybe you could run the whole show, and maybe the Earth will be preserved perfectly. That said, I think if you get to that point, you may not have a need necessarily to preserve the planet, and that's when I think people have to decide, well, how is this a one-way trip? Are we really going to, when we upload ourselves, are we really leaving the Earth behind? And do we absolutely whatsoever not need it anymore? Maybe from that perspective, Earth is actually quite dangerous, given the history of the dinosaurs dying, at least going extinct from asteroids and stuff like that. It might be much better to be in space. So there are a couple things like that that are very interesting to consider. That said, I love the environment and I love animals and I just love it all. So it's hard to imagine at some point when I'm going to say, well, let's just either take all these resources and use it for ourselves, or let's just either abandon it. But those easily could become the cases. When we talk about being transhuman, we're right now we're giving our kind of human perspectives, but as soon as we upload, it might be a very different philosophical paradigm. It might be very different our outlook on everything. And so I'm certainly open to considering some of those things. But I'm hoping that whatever happens, Mother Nature will be left intact and perhaps preserved a lot better than it has been so far. Because I do think we are hurting our planet, and hurting it for a lot of trinkets and a lot of stupid things that don't necessarily matter in the real lives of so many people around the world.
Kind of tying that back in a little bit, what you're saying about possibly 30, 40 years down the road, thinking that this could be possible. I was wondering now, in your novel, there's the biggest part about it, I think, is the conflict between science and religion, the kind of that tussle going on. I was wondering now, as far as, see, I don't know if the 34-year thing, I don't even know if we could get that. I know technology-wise we could. I mean, in 50 years we went from, the technology in the Apollo, now we got more in our cell phones than we had in that. So I know that that's feasible. But as far as with the movement moving on, with religion and politics, do you actually see how that could be possible?
So this is such a great question, because I'm a pretty strong believer that in the next 5 to 10 years, I don't know if it's going to be called transhumanism, but the ideas of technology moving so quickly forward are going to hit the very front pages of all the newspapers and Congress and all governments around the world, as people actually take a step back and say, wow, we really are 5 years from AI being the equivalent of a human being. What does that really mean? Does it mean a Terminator scenario? Does it mean being more helpful to us? And it also, some of these things with genetic engineering and, get into all these questions. I was on an interview last week, and we were talking about transhuman Olympics. Right now, there's all this controversy between, people using enhancement drugs, but maybe we should let people use enhancement drugs. Maybe that's what will be the coolest thing to watch, a runner who can run 70 miles per hour. That's probably the future in 10 years. So there are all these ethical questions that are going to come to the forefront. And everyone says, oh, your novel, it's not going to be a big conflict like that. But I do disagree. I think with a huge population base of the planet being so religious, and with so many older people being in charge, older is kind of the key word because they're just stuck in their value systems.
Exactly.
That I feel we're going to have conflicts with them, and people like me are going to stand up and say, hey, we want to move forward and you're holding us back. The classic example I always use is when George Bush was in office and he put kind of a hold on the stem cell research thing. And frankly, there were hundreds of thousands of people around the world that actually, had, and hopefully they can get out of wheelchairs and stuff like that. And that stuff was put back for that 6-7 years. And honestly, I find that tragic. In fact, I find that criminal. And that kind of thing really bothers me. And if they continue to do that, that's the kind of thing that's going to hold us back. And you're right, that could take it from 35, 40 years to 100, 120 years. Who knows, maybe forever. I worry about that kind of scenario. And I hope as a younger generation comes in and hopefully goes into politics and goes into creating laws, they will create laws that are much more science friendly and much more transhuman friendly, where they'll just say, you know what, it is part of evolutionary destiny for the human being to upgrade itself and become better. Yes, we need to do it so that everyone can participate, and yes, we need to do it so that there's a lot of society can go on without these huge kind of cataclysmic disruptions to it. But at the same time, we need to move forward. And so I'm hoping that that will be the case, though I believe in 5 to 10 years, there will be clashes on the street over some of these things.
See, I see a little bit. I mean, we've seen movement where people, when they do like polling and stuff, where do you find yourself religiously? We've seen people move slowly to the non-religious category where they don't claim it anymore. Not so much atheistic, but they just, I'm not religious. So there's a small trend going there, but it's like you said, with the people that we have in charge and the system in place, I see a really difficult, I don't see it making its way that easily. I mean, for secular people, who I think are the more smart people, I think with them, I think they can see the idea of it and they can accept it. But I think with religious people, and like you said, 95% of the world's, somewhat religious, if not extremist. I don't see the trend moving that quickly. That's a problem. And it's like you said with the stem cell. I mean, you keep having politicians or people that are in power positions that restrict or hold back technologies, science to a point. I don't know. It's very discouraging for me. I mean, when I read what you put, it gets a little violent. I'm not going to get into detail and stuff because, we need people to read the book. But the way it goes, I'm almost like that. I can almost actually see that, though. I think you have a point. I don't know if 5 to 10 years you're going to have people on the streets over it, but I could definitely see down the road it happen. But I think unfortunately, I think it's going to be such a long process, though.
Well, there's definitely no question that religion has held us back as a species. I mean, you just look at what they did in the Dark Ages, and then what they're continuing to do now, not just with stem cells, but with anything else. I mean, you have sects that still don't even take any kind of basic medication at all, and their children die off and stuff, and it's disgusting what happens. But I definitely see conflict coming for sure. I don't know how far that escalates. I personally think that if we focused a lot more of our resources on education, that we could potentially avert the violence. We could kind of delude the conflict to come if we actually focused a lot on education and actually helping the youth understand the benefits of science and medicine. But with that said, I also have an underlined fear because most of our top-tier scientists are used as monetary gain. And anybody who knows anything about large corporations is that they will push out something just to make money off of it, regardless of the negativity that it could put on humanity. Just like you were saying with sports, or GHB and human growth hormone (HGH). We really don't know how healthy that is for a person. There hasn't been enough research into it. They just try and push it out there because it makes money, because they know that these big sports athletes are going to use it. So that's my big fear, and I think I kind of hit on that a little bit. But it's just they're going to use it as a monetary gain, not necessarily a betterment to mankind.
No, absolutely. And I rant against the corporations in my book because I also think that they are, they are after money and they are after that. That's about it. And this is actually why I'm hoping that, as people read my book, they realize that the book is really about the concept of living longer, perhaps living indefinitely. I don't want to say forever or immortality because technically, who knows about that? But, living hundreds of years is certainly a possibility. But when you think about that, living indefinitely, that strikes at the very core of what almost every single religion is teaching. Because every single religion teaches one single thing, which is the afterlife is where you're going to get your piece of the pie. And if you take that away from religion, then they're left with they lose so much of their leverage. They lose so much of their reason for actually even following a religion. And I feel that as transhumanism and ideas of science, it's human enhancement, longevity, life extension research, as all that stuff grows and as all that stuff starts hitting in Congress and some of the politicians, they're going to realize, wow, these guys want to live indefinitely. And if they want to live indefinitely, that means they don't need us at all. That means nobody needs us. And that's why I think the conflict will come, because the religions will get so scared that, before, it's one thing when, we're fighting the Catholic Church and saying, oh, you should be, there should be safe sex or not safe sex or stupid things like that. Those are little things, little battles that go on, indefinitely. But we're actually talking about fundamentally pulling out the rug underneath the major religions of the world and leaving that 95% left just simply holding a bag. And when we do that, I think that's going to scare the leaders of these religious movements so much, and there's the ones that are going to probably prompt the war. In fact, that's why I created the actual storyline in my book based on some of these ideas, because it's one thing to challenge an idea, some of the ideas in a religion. It's another thing to take out its brain. And that's what we're trying to do with transhumanism, is say we can live forever. We have no need anymore of any kind of divine intervention.
That's a really good point. I'm ashamed to say that I really didn't think of that at all. So you might be smarter than me, just maybe
A little.
But no, I think this is why people like me will go to the streets, because at some point it's going to come to a moment when they're going to say, this sort of back to the stem cell thing, okay, this directly affects me, and this, and now I can't, have the length of life that I wanted. And, as I always say, my father had his first heart attack at 51. I just turned 40, and I'm showing very similar signs of health that he had. And I got 11 years left, and the basis of the book, at least the basis of the morality, is that your morality is defined by the amount of time you have left to live. So as that window gets closer and as my health gets worse, I'm going to go to the streets. That's the only thing that's left. And I know a lot of people, there's been so much commotion over the book recently about saying, oh, how could you talk about revolution? This needs to be peaceful. But it's not peaceful when it comes to your own life. There's nothing peaceful about me dying. And that's why I think it's important that we actually establish a morality, some type of system, an ethical system that says, hey, it's okay to rise up when it comes down to our lives. And, that's really what the book's about.
I have to agree with you. I mean, there does have to come a point where you have to stand up and say, enough's enough. We've had enough with your BS. You've held us back long enough. It's time for us to move to the future. We could be exploring outer reaches of space by now if it wasn't for these bastards. And they definitely just are holding us back, and they're a blight to humanity. And they bring us and they put us into like you said, those petty little fights of, safe sex or unsafe sex and abortion and gay marriage and just these little petty arguments that don't really mean anything. They just hold on to it just to kind of be a distraction to what we actually need to be focusing on.
No, absolutely. They are. They know these things. They use these things as distractions, and they try to keep people, basically tied up instead of concentrating on these giant issues, which is, hey, we don't need religion at all. Why don't we just get rid of it? Whoa, I feel a lot better. And you're right. Let's go travel to space now. Let's put all our resources towards other things that can enable the human race to live so much better. And it's I talk a lot about baggage culture in my book, which just kind of sums up what you said, is that they do put these things on you so that you will fight these little things and then, become addicted to your little Walmart trinkets and stuff like this. And pretty soon you live in the 9-to-5 world. You got your 2-car garage, whatever. You're in such a system, it's almost impossible to think outside of it. But the reality is you're still going to die. And until you change that, until you actually find some type of method of living that is going to extend that, the biggest problem of your life is still totally in your face.
I wanted to, I know we've gone over it enough, but if someone was to read your book, let's say, I know the whole thing's based on the whole philosophy and about transhumanism and what it could accomplish for us. But what is the one thing that you'd really want them to pull away from it?
Well, I'd want them to pull away the idea that every single person on the planet, including themselves, faces their own transhumanist wager. Now, it doesn't need to be called a transhumanist wager, but it is, every single person is facing a singular problem. And that problem is that they're going to die, and they should be spending a lot more time thinking about it, because in the 21st century, this is something we can do something about. And okay, if they're religious, it's very difficult to talk to them because they have some afterlife all planned with pink elephants in the sky and whatnot, But honestly, I think most of the younger generation isn't going to buy into that, especially if they just kind of pull them aside and say, hey, really, honestly, I mean, everyone's going to end up 6 feet under, this is, you're going to become worms. The idea is that everyone is facing this conflict and we can do something about it. So what can we do about it? Well, whatever it is that you can do about it, whether it's, dedicate yourself to science, talk about it in a podcast as you gentlemen are doing, which is great. Spend some resources funding some of the groups that are doing that, or just talk about your friends. Whatever it is you can do something for it, because you're doing something for your own life. You're doing something so you can live longer. And, that's kind of based on the fact that you like life. You just simply don't want to die. And so that's what I hope people take away, that they face the transhumanist wager themselves and they need to make a choice in it.
That's definitely poignant and very fantastic. I do have one more thing before we sign off.
I got one more thing after that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead then.
I just wanted to kind of promote also. I saw that you have the blog that you're doing now on Psychology Today.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay, now I saw the one that you put out there. Is this going to be a weekly, monthly thing that you're going to do, or?
So it has to be at least once a month, but it's more likely to be every few weeks.
Okay.
And I'm going to be discussing some of the, and I was very excited that they gave it to me because honestly, it's the first time a kind of a mainstream publication has said, well, go ahead and let's talk about some of these ideas. And there's actually a very large following of both futurists and transhumanists and life extension people, longevity, human enhancement, and just tons of science people. I mean, millions of science people out there that actually find a lot of this very interesting. And so I'm excited to be tackling some of the most I'd say important and essential philosophical questions, as well as psychological questions that involve all sorts of things, whatever it is. I mean, half the stuff we've just talked about it, but I look forward to discussing philosophy of artificial intelligence. I look forward to talking about genetic engineering. I look forward to talking about uploading our brains and what that means, and just and also just kind of basic stuff. What does something like the transhumanist wager mean? But I'm really excited about it because I feel like it means that society is slowly accepting something like this and putting it into a mainstream media publication so that the layperson can actually be introduced to these concepts.
Yeah, I have to admit, I read the blog that you put out the other day, the Origami Cranes and the Transhumanist Philosopher, and I really enjoyed it. It's funny because I read it and I'm just thinking this is stuff that we bitch about constantly. The whole thing about funding science and medicine instead of putting money into these political ventures, usually war and stuff like that. It's like these are the things that we rail on constantly, and it's a great read, and I'd suggest anybody go check it out on psychologytoday.com. So
thank you.
But I don't know if Eric's got anything else, but I really appreciate.
I thought I had something else, but I don't.
See, easy enough. But I really want to say that we appreciate you taking the time. I mean, you're a fascinating guy, and I mean you've done quite a bit, and I'm jealous of you. I have to admit, I wish I could have done some of the things you've been able to do.
Oh yeah, and you definitely cleared up some things with me because I was pretty skeptical about transhumanism. I mean, I'm kind of apprehensive about labels altogether, so I like to try and keep an open mind and try and understand exactly where it's coming from. And you definitely helped me get a more firm grasp. And actually, I've probably been a transhumanist, and I just never knew it. And I also want to apologize for Boggs for not saying a single word this entire time, even though he's been in the room. You don't even know what his voice is like anymore.
It's okay. You didn't miss out on anything.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, I do want to say one thing. Since you said you're already working on a sequel for this, so when the sequel comes out, you got to come back on now. Now you're forced to.
I will. I would love to. And this has been a great conversation. And, going just to labeling with transhumanism, it's true. I mean, whatever. That's why I'm not even that firmly stuck on the name. I mean, I think just in general, people that like life and would like to do logical things like put more money into science and technology so that we can all live better and happier and all these other things. It's such a simple choice when you actually think about it. It just ends up being that somehow you have this blog and I'm sitting here and we realize that around the world, whoever listens to it, huge amounts of people would have a very different perspective based on a religious idea or something like that they've been taught from such a young age, and they actually never even had a choice in that. And I think a lot of people, as they kind of think about these things, will probably come and say, you know what, this kind of makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping that perhaps when the sequel is done and I come back, maybe the world will be a lot better of a place for all of us.
One can only hope.
I certainly hope so. But thank you very much for giving us some of your time. I know it's probably pretty precious because you're trying to get yourself out there as much as you possibly can, because nobody would pick you up before you got popular.
Hey,
because they're a bunch of bastards. But
man, you can't. That's that taboo subject. You can't go against religion in this country.
Yeah, that's a touchy one. But I definitely applaud you for sticking yourself out there and saying, you know what, I'm not going to put up with it. I'm going to put this out there. I'm not going to hold back, because I think a lot of people would have gone after it and then started to go back a little bit on a lot of their stuff just to be like, well, I don't want to piss off too many people. But you're just kind of like, no, this is it. Either take me or leave me, and everybody left you, and you just went independent and got popular. So kudos to you for sure.
Definitely, and we'll definitely throw the link up, and anybody that's listening, go to Amazon, and you can look it up, The Transhumanist Wager by Zoltan Istvan. So again, we appreciate the time very much.
Yeah, hey, you guys, I appreciate it too. Thanks so much for a great conversation.
All right, sir. Good luck to everything. Hope to hear from you soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.